Let's, without further ado, cross to Andy Beeforth and the Cumbria Community Foundation. Andy last appeared on this call on June the 5th, 2020. June the 5th, 2020. So just cast your mind back to June the 5th, 2020. There was quite a lot, or actually, crazy times were going on in the world on June the 5th, 2020. And that's when this Friday call had really taken off and was a great opportunity for people to stay in touch with each other. And Andy talked a bit about the Community Foundation there. But since then, a lot has happened. And one of the most important things is the relaunch of the Cumbria Community Foundation Cultural Fund. So, Andy, tell us a bit about how we've got to this position and what it's all about.
Great. Thank you, Tom. So, yes, I was going to say I'm delighted to be back in happier times because I was on talking about how the Community Foundation was helping people through the coronavirus pandemic and the support we were giving to, well, ultimately, I think we distributed about £3 million to different organisations to provide support. And I guess in some respects, it's a useful context because before I sort of launch into the sort of review of the Cultural Fund, it's worth just saying a little bit about who and what the Community Foundation is and set the context. But before I do that, just say thank you to all of you for all the amazing things you do and what you bring to our communities, because it's really very special. And, I'm sure people don't say thank you to you enough. So it's really important you do that. So the Community Foundation is just celebrating its 25th anniversary, and there are community foundations throughout the UK and throughout the world. And we were created to do something rather sort of sounds quite highfalutin, which is promote philanthropy, promote and celebrate philanthropy. That's private charitable giving. The founding trustees had seen there were community foundations elsewhere and asked the question, should we have one? And we're very fortunate that they worked hard, and we created an organisation which now is home to over 120 different grant making funds. So we're based just outside Cockermouth in Dovenby. Our primary purpose is really around addressing poverty and disadvantage. And last year we gave away over £7 million. But we're also very much about strengthening communities, and we're about to launch new grant making priorities. We launched a new strategy last year, and we're about to launch new grant making priorities. And one of the key strands of our new priorities is just enabling people to be as good as they can be, to fulfill their potential. So the Cultural Fund and a number of our other funds which support cultural activities are very important to us. And it's perhaps worth telling the slightly idiosyncratic story behind the creation of the Cultural Fund. So some of you will have known the most remarkable woman called Mary Burkett, who was an amazing advocate for the arts. She was a former and possibly the director of Abbott Hall. And in the early 2000s, I heard she was being slightly grumpy about the Community Foundation. So I asked her into the office for a coffee and said, why the grumpiness, Mary? And she said, oh, well, I love everything that you do for the community, and helping disadvantaged people's, is really important. But you're going to call me elitist. You're going to tell me that I'm a snob. And I said, well, spit it out, Mary, what's the problem? And she said, well, you don't do anything for the higher arts, and you don't do anything for the mind and for exploring, what it means to be human. And I said, "I'm sorry, we're very young and we don't have much money and we've got to prioritize things." I said, "But I'd love us to be able to have a fund that did something like that." And she went, "Really?" I said, "Yes, I'd be delighted." And I said, "But we would need someone to raise the money and help create that because, we're a small organization." Anyway, zooming forward to today, that fund has supported over 60 different practitioners, and it's really very special. Mary put some of her own money in. She encouraged her friends to donate, and we had a conversation around a year ago that was saying, because we have a panel that oversees the grants from that, and those panel members who've done amazing work bringing expertise and knowledge to the decision making around that. We're all saying we've come to the end of our time. We want to pass the baton on to new panel members, and then they pose the questions: Could we be doing more? And is what we're doing right? So that led to a process where we're very fortunate that Richard Elder, the former director of Rosehill, who was a panel member and a friend of Mary's, was prepared to act predominantly as a volunteer, going out and actually talking to lots and lots of people about what might a refreshed cultural fund do. This year is also the 100th anniversary of Mary, and it seemed very fitting. So let's just see what we might do differently, and can we grow the fund? Richards went out and spoke to, I think, about 26, 27 different people. And we also, with the support of Kate and the team at the Arts and Culture Network, distributed an online survey. And some of you on the call may have replied to that. And we got far more than we bargained for. People didn't want to just talk about the Cultural Fund. I think it was a really sort of cathartic opportunity for people just to offload and share all of their frustrations, all of their passions, and all of their commitments. So there's not time to talk about in detail now what those findings were, but we did produce a report. And this is just, and I think Tom's already circulated the web link to that, but also sitting behind that are much fuller survey results, and it still runs to over 30 pages, I think, but a summary of everyone's input. And we've left those on our website because they're a resource for all of you to use, because many of you need to make the case for the work that you're doing. And I think that's really important that it's an open resource. I'm conscious people will want to ask questions. So I'm conscious of how am I doing for time, Tom?
Yeah, you're doing fine. You're doing fine.
Right. So I will, before I actually get on to the specifics of the Cultural Fund, I will just share with you the sort of summary findings, because I think they're really important. And our report now, sorry, sits as a resource for my team when we're talking with people of wealth and people who might be wanting, so part of what we do is encourage, going back to the original objectives, is promote philanthropy. We now have a resource that when we're talking with people of wealth, we've got something that guides us and provides the basis for the conversations when we're fundraising. But I'll just run through the headlines of the findings. So the first one was just significance, just the importance of what you all do and of the sector. And the need to advocate for constantly, as the Arts and Culture Network does, for arts and culture. Some very worrying and concerning findings around finances and future development. So some of those around the finances and the sustainability of organisations, but also the personal circumstances of practitioners. So them just literally struggling to actually do any artistic practice because of the financial constraints that they're under. What is not a surprise working in the fabulous place that's Cumbria is, despite all the challenges, there's still a lot of energy and a growth mindset. And I think you need that positivity and that drive, irrespective of what might be going on around you. The next thing that we identified was engagement, and just a really important message around having as many people as possible benefiting from arts and culture, and specifically those people who traditionally might not, and particularly around young people, vulnerable people. And I think one of the really special things about the Community Foundation turning attention to arts and culture is that is our community. The organisations that we fund are closest to, and I think one of the really exciting opportunities going forward is how we can build bridges and connections and help practitioners and arts organisations reach into those communities. So I think those will be just the sort of headline findings. You can read the report and you can dig into the fuller details. In terms of the actual Cultural Fund itself, we stopped and said, well, hang on a minute, before we look at the criteria, what about the finances? And so we've made a commitment and a goal. So the Cultural Fund itself only distributes a small number of £1,000 a year. we've sort of stuck our neck out and said we want it to be giving away a minimum of £50,000 a year, but also to grow our endowed funds around culture and the arts to over £1 million. We do have actually some other fund, one particular fund, the Westmond Arts Trust, which is significantly bigger than the cultural fund, and it and other funds like. I don't need to name, but we have a number of other smaller funds with arts will fall under the jurisdiction of our cultural fund panel. So it's not just the cultural fund; it's growing all of the funds that we have. But it's really just trying to step up the level of giving, and not only the amount we give away, but actually the amount to individuals being increased. And if possible, if we're successful, to actually be in a place where we might give multiple awards over multiple years so that we can back people over multiple years. So that's the headline. So the Cultural Fund itself has always been about backing individual practitioners, and that won't change. It's also about promoting excellence in the arts. And that's why we've got the panel, and we're also looking to expand the panel, because you all know it's incredibly hard to make those judgments, and I am not qualified to make those judgments around what is excellence, but it's also about backing talent. So, so those are the fundamentals that we started from. But then we've added an extra layer following the conversations with people about just, if we're going to refresh the fund, what should it do? So the additional considerations that we're adding are those prioritising those least able to afford to develop their talent or creativity, prioritising young people. That doesn't mean to say older people or people who aren't young, and I'm not going to put an age around that, can't apply, but that is a priority. One of the things that came back really strongly from the survey was supporting individual voices and people who want to say something that they feel is important about what's happening in society. And I thought that was really cool and really important. And we will look to, and sometimes some of the things people want to say may not be comfortable and may not be widely welcomed. But guess what? Particularly if they align with the values of the Community Foundation around building a better and fairer society, then we'll want to back those people. Reaching those with least exposure around opportunities to the arts, enabling new and unconventional work, and I've already touched on it, giving larger and potentially multi-year awards. So those were the sort of the refreshed criteria. The one observation from the that's just coming to my head before I sort of draw towards a close, from the findings, which I forgot to mention, which I think is really important, and I don't know who said it, but I'm glad they did. They would and it may have been more than one person, they said they were worried that the sector might be becoming too, these are my words, beige. And I thought that was a really, if you're there to push boundaries, we love arts and culture that's there to make people's hearts sing and explore the meaning of the world. But I think that there was maybe a suggestion that, and I don't know who it was aimed at, but I thought it was nobody should mind a little gentle nudge around that message. So to close, I think the Community Foundation is committed to supporting arts and culture, not just through the Cultural Fund, but the Cultural Fund is there. We've refreshed our panel, and we are looking to recruit 2 new members to that panel, and the material's already out there, and we can share after this meeting how you can apply, because the deadline's early in the new year for joining that panel. We've already got some really interesting expressions of interest around that. And we look forward to hearing from you in terms of the nuts and bolts, because if anyone's gone on our website, you'll see the Cultural Fund is actually closed for applications at the moment because we've spent all the money that's in it. Although I'm delighted to say we've got about 12,000 raised since the relaunch. So fundraising's going quite well. But we'll reopen the fund for applications on the 1st of March with a deadline on the 28th of March. So for those who might be thinking they might like to apply as an individual, that's there. So thank you. I'm open to questions. Thanks again for all that you do. And if you stumble across any sort of random philanthropists who would like to support practitioners develop their work in the county, do send them my way.
Thanks, Andy. That's been a great overview. Thank you very much indeed. If anyone's got any questions, do stick your hand up or stick something into chat. But Kate, do you want to just add a few, Kate Parry, add a few reflections? You were there on the launch night and said a few words. And over to you to kind of build on what Andy's already told us.
Okay. Okay, well, I think I know everybody here, but if not, I'm Kate Parry. I'm the director of CACN, and I did say a few words at the launch of the relaunch of the Cultural Fund. It was a really, really good evening, actually, wasn't it, Andy? It was not least and primarily because of the performances of the 3 or 4 individuals who'd been previously supported by the Cultural Fund, who were just fantastic in every way. It was a really special evening. Anyway, I just wanted to pick up on a few things, Andy. What has anything sort of changed in your head since June the 5th, 2020, when you were last here, in terms of what arts and culture can do and deliver for the Community Foundation and communities? Do you feel like you've been on a journey in your head through this process, or?
So I will answer that question, but before I answer that question, I will address and major omission from my presentation, which the other commitment that the Community Foundation has made has been to work in partnership more with arts organisations, including the Arts and Culture Network. So like Tom, I've got a heavy cold at the moment and I'm only working on about half a brain, so apologies for that.
Okay, I was going to pick up on that, but we can talk about that.
But going back to your question, I don't. I'm going to sound like a very incompetent chief exec of an organisation when I'm about to say what I'm about to say, because I think what was really great about doing the review was, so we've grown from an organisation which in its first year gave away £37,000 and last year gave away 7 million and has been giving away in excess of £2 million a year for quite a long time. And then when I actually looked back into with the support of the team, our grant making, I was more than pleasantly surprised to see just quite how much support we've been putting into arts and culture activities across our mainstream grant making. But what I think what the work we've done, and it's not just been talking with arts and culture organisations and practitioners, it's also having discussions within the organisation, it's crystallising how arts and culture contributes to the objectives of the Community Foundation. And, as we've always been a growing and ambitious organisation, and we haven't really until this year had the opportunity to just stop and sit back and reflect. So, it's been very gratifying to see that. I think inherently, some of the really energetic, aspirational, fabulous organisations in the arts and culture world have been approaching us, have been successful in getting support. And it's not just been using arts as a therapeutic tool. It has been about bringing people together and whatever. So we're still going on a journey. I think we expect that we will build on the learning that we've got to further describe how arts and culture contributes to the work that we do.
Okay.
But it's crystallised it, I think, or we've at least
Yes.
got it tied down.
Yeah, that's good. So I think it is also up to us running creative and cultural organisations, or even working on your own as a practitioner, to really think hard about the projects that we create and what we apply for, because I think there is a tendency to just say, I'll apply to the cultural fund. But as you say, you've got dozens of different funds that if we use our imagination and work in partnership and collaboratively, there's loads of opportunities actually for cultural and creative organisations to not only access the money that you manage, but also meet your outcomes and ambitions, for the community foundation and for our cultural organisations. So I remember when I ran the Kergate for 10 years, and Cockermouth flooded, the first organisation to step in and give the Kergate Centre some money to respond for the community was the Community Foundation. And even though we were an arts centre, we were given money basically to put on social events that ran for a couple of years, actually, bringing together people who'd been displaced from their homes and people whose businesses had been trashed. So it's up to us also to think tangentially about what arts and culture can do, rather, not just, I want to put on this show, please give us some money.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of give a little bit of a sort of a taster of the direction of travel with our grant making priorities and some of the conversations that we're having about the role of the Community Foundation is the importance of connectedness between people in communities to support resilience within communities. So, the challenges that we will all face around climate crisis, and this isn't just about the immediate impact of climate change, it's what it means in terms of food security and energy security, and some of the really quite frightening tensions that we'll be under, and the role that arts organisations have. You and I, Kate, had conversations about simply just an opportunity to smile and have a good time, but also, I've been involved in the past with the rural touring scheme, and how, some of those events in village halls that bring people together in a village hall or wherever it might be, who get to meet each other, who've never met before. There's always the challenge, and again, this was picked up in the report about audience building, but some of it's just very simple and very fundamental.
Yeah. Okay, so we are, Cumbria Arts and Culture Network is absolutely committed to working in partnership going forward with the Community Foundation. And you and I, Andy, have talked about what that might look like, and we've got some ideas. But I think what we've agreed really is that we'll keep our eyes peeled for opportunities, really, and be able to respond. So where we spot a particular need or an opportunity or a chance to seize the money and make it work for arts and cultural organisations and individual practitioners, that's what we're going to do. And I'm really pleased about that, and I'm really excited about it too. What I just wanted to say finally is that my family has a fund, a grant giving fund with the Community Foundation, thanks to Andy and his team. Because when my mum died 6.5 years ago, of a brain tumour. She was a music teacher, and we decided that we wanted to set up a fund that would support community music making in West Cumbria. And actually, before she died, I remember sitting by her hospital bed and sending Andy a message to say, will you help me? Because I've had this idea that I want to keep the spirit of what she did throughout her life. I want to keep that going. And so I sat by my mum's bed and I worked out the basics of it with Andy and his team on my phone, and then we got on with it basically, and we've called it Bridget's Magical Music Pot, which I didn't expect to be the name that stuck, but it kind of did. So it's there and it's functioning and it's active for anybody in West Cumbria who wants to make music with other people for fun, and that's really the criteria. You've got to have fun doing it, because that is what my mum would have wanted. So there is money there right now, and I'm actually pleased to say we gave out just very recently the second grant from that, because the first, what we had to do first of all was raise £50,000 to make it into an endowed fund, which was a bit of a job and a half, but we got there. So the second grant has just gone out to the West Cumbria Jazz Club in Beckermit Village Hall. I believe I've got the details right there. So anybody can do it, and there's loads of interesting funds that the Community Foundation looks after. So if you know people who might want to tap into that little pot of money for West Cumbria, have a look on the Cumbria Foundation website for Bridget's Magical Music Pot. So yeah, thanks for Andy for doing all of that.
I think it's a great name. I think it's a
Yeah.
great name.
It's a bit daft, but it kind of, I remember saying to Andy and others, Jenny at the Community Foundation at the time, it's like, well, we could call it Bridget's Magical Music Pot or something. I'll come up with a better name, and I never did. So.
I'm glad you lost the or something, because I think that would have diminished it a little bit. But the Magical Music Pot is great. While we've got Andy, if anyone wants to ask any questions about the community fund or about the cultural fund in particular, now is a good time. But I have to say, I've always found it a good accessible place to contact and to answer questions to bids for various things that you might be involved in. Amy.
Yeah, thanks for coming to tell us about this. It's really interesting. I just wondered what the process would be, sort of say versus if you're an individual artist, you've got a project in mind, it's going to have benefit to the community and everything. So if you want to apply for a fund, what would the process be? And versus maybe if you're an organisation, is it the same process? Do you just go to the website? Sort of how many forms do you have to fill in? What do you do?
So you can go to the website, but what we always encourage people to do is pick up the phone and just speak to a grants officer and talk through your project, because we've got so many different funds, and some of them, like, it's really worrying at the moment that we're still a quarter left in our financial year, or more than a quarter left in our financial year, and most of our funds are spent up. So, it's sometimes it's not whether does your project fit, it's does your project fit and do we have any money at the moment? But also it can often be very dynamic. So we've got a lovely couple coming in for a little celebration photograph and a mince pie and a cup of coffee next week. And they're creating a new fund, and the wife is interested in visual arts. We've only just got the money. We're going to have £5,000 to support visual arts. We didn't have that 3 months ago. We didn't get the check until 2 weeks ago. Do you know what I mean? So it's always worth picking up the phone and having a conversation.
Any more for any more?
Tom, I can't work out quite how to get the hand up.
Derek,
you can see
your
I
hand
can't
is always
work
up.
out how to
Go for
work
it.
my camera either. So I just wanted to say, well, apart from saying thank you to Andy, it strikes me that the word community is actually the key to the arts too. If this organization means anything, and particularly when so many people sadly still see the arts as something over there which is not relevant to them. And that has not been helped by the setup in education. But now that we've all got over the shock of Michael Gove being the inventor of phonics, we ought to be able to have more emphasis on the arts within schools, more time, more value. And I just wondered whether you actually deal much with schools.
We tend not. Our main, and anyone linked with schools will probably start booing and hissing as if we're at a Christmas panto when I say this. We find that although schools are always stretched for funding, they tend not to be as stretched for funding as community organisations and charities, and we just we don't have those links. We have a lot of links into youth organisations and children and family organisations, and those tend to be working with either the most disadvantaged children or those children who aren't in the school system. We do have some connections with some specific schools where we have very fortunate, where we've got some funds that support foreign travel, sport, arts. I'm going to do some outrageous name dropping now. I've just got Melvin Bragg to set up a fund that will support children at Nelson Tomlinson School. So it tends to be very patchy. Burnett's solicitors have also set up a fund that will link with a particular school. So I'm sorry, Derek, we don't, but it's very nice to see you on the call.
Well, thanks, Andy. I wasn't really thinking as whether you're funding things in schools, but whether you were able to exercise any influence on schools.
I think the challenge we have with schools, because we've got a great relationship with the Dunning family. We've got the Westmoreland businesses, and we actually invest into 3 schools with some of their funding. And the challenge that we really have with them, and we've just done the same with Nelson Tomlinson, is that, and I completely understand this, schools are so stretched. We actually sometimes struggle to spend money in schools because they haven't got the bandwidth, the staff haven't got the bandwidth to actually run with it. And, I was delighted to see, I won't name the school, but I saw in our grant payments this week going to one of the schools in the Westmoreland catchment area that we've been struggling to get to take up the offer of money for years. And so I think it's not always as easy as you might think.
No, I understand that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Derek. That's great. Andy, thanks so much for sharing all that with us this morning. It's been really interesting, and I'm sure it's been a massive effort just to get that back up and running again, but really well worth it. And I'd like to think that through the network's collaboration, largely through Kate with yourself and the team at the foundation, moving forwards and sort of medium to long term as much as the short term, there's some really good business that can be done. And we can help also promulgate the message about the availability of the fund as well through this call and our newsletter and various social media channels, the website, etc., etc.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and lovely to see everyone. Have a great Christmas. Have a great operation, Sue. We look forward to seeing you clog dancing in the new year.
All
Bye
right.
for now.
Right. Well, we're now going to hear from Sarah, lovely Sarah Penn, about Cumbria Voluntary Services, CVS, and the whole notion of social prescribing. It's one of those phrases that you kind of roughly know what it is, but don't exactly know. So I think we've got 2 or 3 graphics that's going to help explain it. And also Sarah's going to talk about where CVS sits in the Venn diagram of social prescribing across the county as well. So Sarah, the floor is yours, and thank you for coming this morning.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to be in a meeting like this rather than I spend a lot of my time in health sector meetings, and yeah, it's nice that there haven't been any long acronyms or any any abbreviations that nobody understands. I'll let CCF off with that one, but yeah, I mean Cumbria CVS is itself an acronym, isn't it? So my role is Health Partnerships Support Officer at Cumbria CVS, and a lot of you might be more familiar with Cumbria CVS in terms of its volunteering side. So Judith and her amazing team that help kind of populate the voluntary sector with amazing volunteers. My little team is a bit of an in-between team. So we exist to help the health sector, the social care sector, to understand the voluntary community social enterprise sector, and vice versa, really, because they're 2 very complex systems. I mean, the voluntary sector isn't itself a system, it's a collection of lots of very disparate kind of organisations and sectors. And then the health sector, as I'm sure you all know, can be quite difficult to understand, quite difficult to get your head around, even when you're working within it. Even the people who are working for the organisations often struggle to understand how it all fits together. So that's kind of, I had to describe my job in 3 words the other day, which I kind of did, but they repeat a lot. So I came up with helping people who help people to help people. It was much easier when I was a nurse or a journalist. They were more easy to explain, but yeah, I have this strange job that is, yeah, can seem very thankless at times, but hopefully I help people to understand those different systems both ways. So in terms of social prescribing, it might be helpful to put, yeah, that first graphic up. And as soon as I'd done this, I kept and sent it over to Tom. I kept on thinking, oh, that's not, that's not complete. That's not fully right. And I think it's always going to be like this. So the term social prescribing has been around for a long time. It really gained traction in about 2019 when NHS England put a lot of money into it, and then we started to see social prescribing popping up in GP surgeries, but always with different names, different kind of job descriptions, different roles. So what we have now is quite a complicated array of different workers, but we tend to refer to them in my role as link workers. They do that linking between different systems generally. So between people who might arrive at a GP surgery, they might be in hospital, they might be in touch with the council, they might be in an ambulance, they might be in touch with social workers. So people in that setting. And then you have on the other side what we all know, anybody who works in the voluntary sector or in the arts and culture or in any of those other subcategories that I've got over on the in the pinky purpley section, that what helps people get better, what helps people stay well, what helps their their life in a very holistic way, are all these other things. You're not going to be able to fix people with pills and with medical interventions always. What you need is this the approach that is going to help them on all kinds of different levels. And I guess for you guys, that will seem just instinctively and obviously true, that people are more than a sum of their kind of bodily organs and the prescriptions and the diagnoses that we give them. But I suppose that hasn't always been necessarily obvious or easily understood by a health system that prioritizes evidence with randomized control trials at the top. And so some of those more kind of woolly and more difficult to pin down, but incredibly important benefits of things like arts and culture, of simply being together with somebody else, having human connection, the impact of that is much harder to measure, and so it's much less well understood by those evidence-driven health services. So that's the bit where the term social prescription comes in, because that clinical setting, that medical setting, understands a prescription. There's a problem, you write a prescription, that person then goes and takes that prescription to wherever they're going to be given some sort of solution or help. So a lot of people don't like the term, a lot of people love the term. But I suppose understanding where it comes from in terms of attempting to level that playing field in a clinical setting between there being a medical solution to everything and there being these non-medical solutions to things that are really all about people's hopes, people's dreams, people's self-esteem, their connectivity to other human beings and to their landscape and to their communities around them. So I suppose it is a challenging space because you're attempting to get these two very different mindsets to kind of connect and talk to each other. And that is, I suppose, where the social prescribers, where the link workers, and then where I come in as well, in terms of trying to help it all kind of talk to each other and work out what's going on. So social prescribing, it is a variety of different things, a variety of different roles, a variety of different models, a variety of different employers. But the common thread that runs through it all, that I think from the year that I've been doing this job, is that you have somebody who in some way can stand with somebody who has a need, to help them access the right kind of community support that will help them with that need. So there's a person who will help you do that, overcome some of those barriers, and then there's a connection outwards into the community, whatever that might look like for that person. So there are those two aspects, that holistic standing side by side, personalizing through that worker, and then it going outwards into the community. And in that sense, you can never fully measure the impact of it because it's that ripple effect. It's that, helping people to actually engage in their communities. And what you were saying before about the arts being seen as something over there that is not for me. I think that link working can have a really important role in terms of arts and culture, because it is something where there are both real barriers, but also very perceived internal barriers. So there might be barriers in terms of accessing arts, there might be barriers in terms of transport to where you might go, but equally there are going to be those internal barriers of this isn't for me, this isn't something someone like me can do, and that's again where these link workers might come in. So in terms of why the arts and culture sectors, workers, organisations, artists, why you might want to know more about it, and some of you might well know about it already, but there have been lots of pockets of really great social prescribing based around arts. It is well evidenced in terms of the effect that it can have. Unsurprisingly, we know that the creative arts can have a really powerful impact on people's health and well-being, physical health, mental health, overall health. And there are some really great projects. I've got a few links that I'll put in the chat just to kind of see how this can operate in other areas. In Cumbria, we have everything is the landscape in Cumbria in terms of social prescribing is different to everywhere else, but there is no standard model, so it's not like we're different and everybody else is the same. It is different, and we have kind of a complex geography, a complex health geography, a complex county council geography, and kind of working out what that looks like can be complicated, but ultimately it is about creating those connections into the voluntary sector, and that's something that we have. We have a thriving voluntary sector in Cumbria in a lot of ways. Where was I? So in terms of why you might want to connect, it's about making those links between creative health. That might be another buzzword you've heard, creative health. And there is a lot of kind of high level thinking around it. So you have the government putting, and the Arts Council funding the National Centre for Creative Health associates sitting on a regional level. And then in terms of social prescribing, the National Academy of Social Prescribing released earlier this week a report which is talking about setting up a shared investment fund. So along the community foundation lines, a shared investment fund for the social prescribing activities. And I suppose it's worth touching on that because I would say that it is up until this point in Cumbria, at least, we've funded the link workers, but we haven't fully funded the end destination of those people. So the analogy that we often hear is, we've got loads of travel agents and no holiday destinations. And what has the impact of that big NHS investment in social prescribing link workers? It's actually kind of dried up any capacity within the voluntary sector without any money following that. So we recognise that, and we've been doing a lot of work locally with the Cumbria Community Foundation and a lot of work nationally with the National Lottery and the National Academy of Social Prescribing to really make that a key part of social prescribing. You can't really have social prescribing if you just have the link workers. All you do then is create another level of clinical worker, and without having somewhere to go. So I suppose that's a lot of the work that I've been doing. I've been connecting up the voluntary sector and the link workers through my role. But one of the other things that I do is run a steering group, which looks at some of these more strategic things. And we have people like the Directors of Public Health, Colin Cox, people from the health system, the Integrated Care Board. We have GP clinical leads, so people who are making those commissioning decisions, and we have the CCF there as well. And one of the things that we're looking at first is how we collate all the data from this very complicated system, but then also how we might look at some kind of a local shared investment fund that would enable the activities that really are the heart of social prescribing to actually take place. So the reason why I originally got in touch with Tom was actually, it was mainly because I bumped into him at Cockermouth Hospital, and I needed somebody to help me remove a room partition, and I couldn't work out how to open it. So that was the initial connection. But I think that's often how things happen. We have on that steering group, we have a representative from Active Cumbria. We have somebody from Natural England, and it really feels like a big gap at the moment that we don't have somebody from the arts and culture sector to sort of, raise their voice, to amplify the potential benefits, and also to say, yeah, but what about this? This won't work for us. We're not all charities. We're, whatever those issues might be that are specific to the arts and culture sector. So we would love somebody to be part of that steering group and to influence some of those decisions and some of those the direction that's going in. So I suppose that's one thing that I would really like to. This is quite a nice one. This is part of the terms of reference of that steering group. We took the steering group off the health system because they reorganised and it disappeared from them. So we took it and I rewrote the terms of reference to include a lot more diagrams and a lot fewer words. So this is kind of some of the common themes that run through social prescribing in all its different guises, in all its different roles, in all its different employers. And I think a lot of them, it's really key. It's really kind of obvious how they might relate to the arts in terms of supporting somebody to overcome those barriers. There are definite barriers, like we talked about, being enabled and empowered. And again, that is something that that the arts can do brilliantly. That kind of sense of self and empowerment is a really key part. That physical health being intrinsically linked to a psychosocial context is really important, that it's non-medical, that there is some kind of wraparound support, that you're not just giving somebody a leaflet and saying off you go, go to this group. And we know how often that can fail as a way of kind of introducing people into something new. It can be at lots of different intensities, and the next slide might give a bit of an idea of that if you move on to that one. So I was just working on this yesterday, just as I was trying to describe the different levels, different intensities. And at the one end, you do have a kind of signposting, so that might be very light touch. In West Cumbria, people might be familiar with the Joy app, which is a web directory essentially that makes referrals, self-referrals, referrals between organisations. So that sort of sits at that low level. And then slightly up from that, you might have a similar signposting, but a much more supported one where that worker will make connection directly with the organisation, will spend a bit of time making sure that that's a good fit, rather than just sending out a load of referrals that never go anywhere. And then the next bit, supported activities, you might have somebody who would go along to the first group with somebody who might take them, go meet them first, go in with them, attend the activity with them. So that kind of really being by someone's side at every step of the way while they need them. And then when they don't need them, they can kind of step back. And then you have a much longer term health coaching model. Often the council delivers this in their health and wellbeing coaches. They can spend 6 months with somebody trying to make some kind of behaviour change, whether that's smoking, lifestyle. They would spend a lot longer with them, working with them, and again, linking them into community activities as well.
All right, Sarah.
So, yeah.
That's great. That's been a really clear explanation of where you fit into it all and what social prescribing is. I'm just picking up on George's lovely little note in chat. For a year, I ran a weekly creative writing workshop for people leaving the NHS care. It was a great experience, and I got as much from this as the participants themselves. So that's a lovely comment, George. Yeah. All right. So Sarah, are you able to put your contact into chat?
I'll put my contact in, and would it be helpful to put some links into the chat to some of those
put them in now,
things that I've mentioned, or would it be better to put them in an email, whatever people would prefer?
Put them into chat if you've got time. We've got 5 minutes left on the call, and we'll pick up on this whole, is there an opportunity here for someone to join your board to make sure the voice of the arts and culture sector is heard in what this is all about, because if it's not, it's going to be a miss, I think, probably. Okay, so sarah.penn at cumbriacvs.org.uk, and then some links going in from Sarah then as well. Sarah, great. Thanks ever so much. It must be, it's a complicated old world to put yourself into and try and sort of swim through the morass of complexity that decades of NHS bureaucracy and acronyms have probably laid bare. But that's been very useful. Thank you very much indeed. Helix, I know.
I hope it has. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank you for bearing with me and my diagrams.
They were very useful. Right, before we finish, Kate Brundrett, who runs Studio Moorland, has got some great talks coming up. Kate, tell us what's going on.
Hello, hello. I'm so sorry you've got a cold, Tom. It's like I can feel that. And Sarah, it's brilliant to hear about the social prescribing. There's so much work to do linking the arts with that. It's been a big gap. So yeah, that's really good to hear. Um, so as
Kate, you've gone a bit wobbly on me. Is it just me?
which is sad, but
Hang on, Kate.
sorry.
We didn't hear what you said. So turn your camera off and start again because the signal broke up.
Oh, I'm going to go a bit closer to the mic. I'm on a wheelie trolley. Look, that might help. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
carry
Can
on
you hear me?
talking. So we didn't hear what you said.
Okay, cool. So, as some of you might know, unfortunately, the studio will be closing at the end of January because it's not sustainable anymore, which is sad, but we've just got to move forward with that. But our last funded program that we're going to be doing here, thanks to Westmoreland and Furness UK SPF Fund, got that right, is a series of creative thinkers talks. We did these last year. They were lovely and successful, really, really fantastic. And this year, rather than have one individual practitioner, we're going to have 5 different themes. My battery's going to run out. We've got art and conflict tonight. We've got a Dutch artist, and she's been walking the Ukraine front line, taking sound samples of soldiers there, and she's made a sound work. We've got lovely Mark Gibbs from Carlisle, and we've got a conflict resolution facilitator, and she's been to Ukraine and Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, all across Africa, and she's going to talk to us about her experience of arts. And then after that, we've got next week art and young people, and then we've got art and mental health with Alex Stanimore from Mind Over Mountains. And then we've got art and regeneration, which will be amazing as well. We've got Nick coming on about the Sycamore Gap, and we've also got me at the end and a bit of a party probably. So that's December and January. Please come and get involved. I'll put a link in the chat. That's me done.
Great. And Sarah's just said, Kate, can you put some bits in if you can email her some bits? She will circulate those to around 900 people for you as well. So have a look at that in chat.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, right. We're almost done. Next week, it's the Christmas call. You need to bring with you a potato peeler or an apple peeler, an after eight or an equivalent chocolate, and some blank paper and a book to rest on. Chris Dennett, the wonderful man that is Chris Dennett, is going to help me run the call next week, and it's going to be think Taskmaster. If you know Taskmaster, that's what it's going to be all about. And we'll try and get Sue up on a call from her hospital bed, try and get her involved as well. So it's going to be a bit of fun next week, and there'll be a festive theme to it. And also, Kate Parry, she doesn't know this yet, but she's going to do a detailed review of the year from a culture and arts and culture network perspective as well, with lots of data and lots of
course
excellent
I am.
stories to tell
No
about how it's
problem.
gone this year as well. So that is the plan for next week. So a potato peeler or an apple peeler. This is all direct from Chris Dennett's brain, by the way. An after eight or an equivalent type chocolate, and some blank paper and a book to rest on. I'll remind you of it in the newsletter as well, but it might be a bit of fun. You never know. And we'll all be
What about silly hats?
and obviously we'll all so a massive push to look festive in your little square Zoom window as well. Pete's got a lovely backdrop of snow and whatever already, so he's almost there already. So something like Pete for everybody, something like Sue for everybody as well. And I will make you laugh and have fun if it's the last thing I do next week. Right. Thank you so much, Monique. Nice to see you. Thank you so much to Andy, who's had to go, to Sarah and to Kate for those messages about what's going on. I've learned loads actually on this call this morning, and I've got quite a lot to think about too. So thank you to those people and for everybody's contribution. Lovely to see you. Thank you for choosing to spend an hour this morning with us, and hope you stay healthy and see you again next week.